So in the past, I've done a couple of tutorials on the basics of incorporating external XML files into your Flash projects, but they've been focused on ActionScript 2. So now is the tutorial that's going to show you how to accomplish that using ActionScript 3. And I think you'll find that it's a much improved workflow. And the technology used in ActionScript 3 is called E4X. And it's a standard way of dealing with XML files. And it's quite a bit easier once you get to know it. So I've just created a new Flash document, saved it to the desktop as xml.fla. As always, I've renamed the first layer to actions and locked it. And down here, I've made the movie 700 by 400 at 30 frames per second. So essentially what we're going to be doing is creating a very simple RSS reader that's going to read in an external RSS feed and just display the items in a list box and then allow you to see the actual data for that item. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is create a new layer above the actions layer. And I'm going to call this components. So we're going to be using some of the new ActionScript 3 components that come with Flash CS3. So this will also be a helpful tutorial on using these components. Then I'm going to go to the components panel, and under user interface, first thing I'm going to drag out is a list box. So I'm just going to, and this tutorial is not at all going to be about creating something that looks good. I'm going to go to free transform. Just going to hold down the Alt key and then just position it, just size it up about like that. And I'm going to give this an instance name of LB for list box. So this is going to hold the actual items that are coming in through the RSS feed. Okay, the next thing I'm going to drag out is a text area, which just displays text. So I'm just going to position this up next to the list box. Again, free transform, hold down the Alt key, and then just drag it out and fill the rest of the area like that. And I'm going to give this an instance name of TA for text area. Okay, so that's all this movie is going to consist of, is just a list box and a text area. So I'm going to go ahead and lock this layer now, and now we can start writing the action script. So I'm going to highlight the first keyframe in the actions layer and open up the actions panel. Okay, so the first thing you need to do to read in any type of external file is to, and this could be reading in some HTML or XML as we're doing here, is to create a new URL loader instance. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to create a variable called loader, and I'm going to data type it to URL loader. And this does exactly what its name implies. It goes out to a URL and loads that file into your Flash movie. So I'm going to create a new URL loader. Okay, so what we want to do is when this URL loader has finished loading in our external file, we want to be notified of that event so that we can then handle the data. So what we need to do is to add an event listener to this loader. So loader.addEventListener. And the event we want to listen for is event.complete. There it is. And I'm going to have it call a function called onLoaded. So again, once we tell it to load a file, as soon as it's done loading that information, it's going to call this onLoaded function. Okay, so I'm going to quickly write that function. So onLoaded, and it returns the event object, which we're going to be using to get to the data. Okay, so inside of here, we now can get access to the data in that file by going through that event object that's sent. So let's just trace it out really quick. So if we do e.target, which gets us to the object that this listener was applied to, and then get the data property, which contains all of the data coming in from that file. Okay, so then the last thing I need to do is to actually tell this loader object to go out and load a file from a URL. So I just say loader.load, and then again, when you're using URLs inside of ActionScript 3, you don't just use a string. You create a new URL request object. So that's URL request. And then inside of its constructor, that's where you actually put the actual URL. So I'm just going to load in the RSS feed from my blog, which is theflashblog.com/feed equals RSS. So I can close this, close the URL request, and close the load method. So now if we test the movie, we can see now in the output panel, we can see all of that XML, that RSS-based XML here in the output panel. So now at this point, we've accomplished the first task, which is getting that external data into our Flash movie. Now we need to start using the new XML features to get in here and parse out this information. Okay, so close this. Okay, so now the first thing we want to do is to create a new XML object, which is going to hold all of this data. So I'm going to do it right after this event listener. So I'm going to call it XML, data type it to XML. Now, unlike AS2, where you had to call the ignore white or set the ignore white property to true in order to get it to ignore white space, you no longer have to do that. So that's the default behavior now. So I've created a variable called XML. Now inside of here, instead of tracing this out, I'm going to set that variable equal to a new XML object, and then I'm going to pass in that data, which contains the RSS, into the constructor for this XML file. So now my XML variable is now populated with that file, and now I can go through and start displaying specific pieces of information. Okay, so the way in which you get to different parts of the XML file is a lot easier than it was in AS2. In AS2, you use the syntax of first child, child nodes, and you'd have to basically walk down the tree. You couldn't just say, give me all the items in this XML file. You couldn't specify things by name. Well, in the new way of doing things, you can do that. So let's just trace a few things out here. So in an RSS feed, the structure of the XML is like this. So first we go to our XML object, which has all that information. And we can actually look in the output panel here. So we can see the first tag is RSS, and then channel. And then inside of the channel, we have things like title, link, description, and then all of our items. So we don't need to actually go to RSS since that's the first tag. But if we just go to xml.channel and we trace that out, we can see we just get the channel information. So let's go ahead and close